Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on polling that puts the Premier's popularity at an all-time low. But first, petition complete.
Very happy, relieved and exhausted.
Water Not Coal petition proponent Corb Lund dropping off boxes of signatures at the Elections Alberta office in Edmonton Wednesday, an effort to halt coal exploration and mining on the eastern slopes. And Corb Lund joins us now in studio. There he is.
Morning.
How are you, Corb?
I haven't changed clothes since last night, as you can see.
Well, I wasn't going to ask you about that. However, but maybe as a starting point, under legislation, we all know this, to have a successful petition meant collecting roughly 178,000 signatures. So where'd you land?
206, something like that. Despite the weather challenges, if I ever had to do this again, which I never would, I would only run it in the summer. The weather's a huge factor. But despite the weather challenges, our canvassers were soldiers and got out there and got the job done.
And what did it take? What did it take to actually do that?
A lot of organizing and a lot of grit from a lot of people. You know, it was really gratifying to see. It was a historic moment because it brought a lot of Albertans together, rural and urban and First Nations and small towns from across the political spectrum. And we had signatures from, I think, 84 or 85 out of the 87 ridings, except for a couple really remote ones up north. So it was very much it was a lot of work and a lot of effort and sleepless nights and a lot of uncertainty because we didn't know the number until the very end when we actually get the sheets back. We had a guess, but we really didn't know, so we had to keep the foot on the gas till the end. But in the end, it was a really great experience. A lot of our canvassers expressed how much camaraderie they felt, and they'd met a lot of great people that they would have never met otherwise because of the breadth of the support on this thing. So,
how much pushback though did you get along the way?
Not much.
There is, to a degree, this is a divisive issue because there are Albertans who support coal mining activity and the potential economic benefits that could come with it.
For sure, and more importantly, there's an Australian billionaire woman who's behind a lot of these coal companies who is very intent on getting our coal. So they have very deep pockets, and you know, I've run into some opposition in person, but not much. But a lot online, so you don't know how much of that is real and how much of it is robots or whatever. But certainly there's some pushback, and I expected there to be some because there's a lot of money at stake. This is a classic case, in my opinion, of a billionaire, a foreign billionaire in this case, coming from Australia and lobbying the living heck out of our government to regulate in favor of the industry rather than in favor of Albertans. And one of the arguments I hear from Albertans who are pro coal projects is jobs, but I mean, you have to look at jobs is not a magic wand that you can wave to mitigate all the downstream effects because you have to look at every project individually. And I said this to you earlier, I'm not anti-resource, but you have to look at each project to see if it makes sense. And when you look at the cost benefit on this, like the cost is going to be very high and potentially really damaging. And the upside is very small because they're offering a handful of jobs while at the same time aggressively bragging about how they're embracing automation to reduce labor costs. And also the impacts have to be measured against the agricultural sector or the tourism sector. So in the end, and the royalty rate's really low, so the economics of this really don't make sense to me. And I tell every fiscal conservative that I meet, I'm one of them, is that if you really are concerned about the taxpayer, this is a golden opportunity to save us billions, because I just guarantee that at the end of this, 20 years from now, whatever it is, when the coal's gone, there's going to be a hell of a mess left to the taxpayer to clean up.
A few weeks back at an unrelated news conference, the Premier said she was meeting with you later in the day. Mm-hmm. What did Danielle Smith commit to where a successful petition is concerned?
Not much. Not much, because I went into the meeting with Laura Lang, who's a rancher west of Nanton, who brought me into this 6 years ago. And our only asks of the government were two things. One, the most important one is if we get our number, which we have, and Elections Alberta will confirm that in a couple of weeks, if we get our number, make it a fair fight and don't mess with our question, because we spent a lot of time specifically wording the question in a very specific way. It's been approved by Elections Alberta, and by the time they approve our signature count, there will have been 200,000 people plus who, by law, have to read the question as they sign it or have it read to them. And so I said to her, please, the main thing I'm asking from you guys is just assurance that you won't mess with our question, because we've put a lot of work into it, and 200,000 people will have signed it. So please, if we are on the referendum, use our verbatim question. And she said 2 or 3 times, well, you know, I don't see why we wouldn't. And then she conferred with her chief of staff, and then the end answer was, this is almost verbatim, I don't see why we would change your question unless there's some kind of legal or financial issue. But the whole thing is a legal financial issue, so that's a hell of a loophole. So I'm just appealing to the public and to the government themselves to be fair about this. And if we do get our signatures approved by EA, that they honor our question that 200,000 people would have signed. Sorry to interrupt, but the key thing, what I'm talking about, is the projects that we mentioned, because Grassy Mountain, which is a project that was refused as not being in the public good 3 or 4 years ago by the feds, the provincial government, as well as courts of appeal, they all said it can't go forward because it's not in the public interest. And somehow it was revived. And somebody in government really, really, really wants Grassy to go in, because I think it's the foot in the door, the thin edge of the wedge. And that's the key thing that they were pushing back on us about in the meeting, is whether or not Grassy Mountain deserved to be allowed to go ahead or not. And our position is that it very much should not be, because Albertans have already fought this mine once and had it turned down by every level of government. And it's just frustrating how many times Albertans have to say no to the same foreign coal company, the same project.
When we spoke early, when we spoke early in the campaign, you made a point of stating that you were not approaching this process from a political partisan.
I'm not pro what?
You didn't approach it from a political partisan standpoint.
Yeah.
That said, though, now that you've gone through, what kind of a window has it given you to politics in Alberta? It's
gross. I don't like any of the parties. I don't like any of them. I don't trust any of them. I have no affiliation with any party. And municipal politics I can stomach, because it's local enough that it can be real and actually get the stuff done. But I was kind of a cynic before, but after 6 years of dealing with government ministers, and I mean, it's the best system we got, I guess, but it's gross.
Okay.
I think this whole project is crooked. I think it doesn't make any sense economically, and it certainly doesn't make sense ecologically. And there's no, and it's, to my eye, it burns up a lot of political capital, because there are a lot of UCP voters who are also not in favor of these mines. Ranchers that brought me into this, irrigating farmers, hunters, fishermen, and I don't understand why the government is so hell-bent on these mines when it doesn't make sense politically. To me, at least, the polling shows over and over that 70–80% of Albertans don't want them. So I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't seem square to me.
Okay, last question for you. In completing the petition, is this the first hurdle of a rather long race? What are you prepared to face moving forward once it is that, or if it is, that Elections Alberta verifies the petition?
Yeah, I'd say this is, in the 6 years I've been at this, is probably the 4th or 5th of a long series of hurdles. Certainly many hurdles to come.
And you're prepared to defend this?
Yeah, these guys have.
With it?
Yeah, these guys have. Both the government people and the coal companies have, in my opinion, been so disingenuous with me so many times. I have my heels dug in, and me and my team are not going anywhere at all until we get legislation that stops this ridiculous mining up there.
Corb Lund, appreciate you coming in. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
From pipeline optimism to slumping poll numbers for the Premier, and what lies ahead for Corb Lund's anti-coal petition. Time now for tonight's politics panel. Joining us this evening, Jim Groom, political scientist, recently retired from Medicine Hat College, and Rob Breckenridge, writer, broadcaster, and Calgary Herald columnist. Good evening to you both, and let's begin with the Smith government cracking open the door on developments behind the scenes in the bid to land a new bitumen pipeline to the West Coast.
We've had one particular discussion with a proponent, actually a Fortune 500 company, in very general terms, about financing the entire project and building the entire project.
Well, Brian Jean says a number of proponents have come forward asking to participate. He's not naming any of the companies or say if they will be identified in the application due to the Major Projects Office July 1st. The minister does, though, say First Nations will be in the partnership and that it's possible different levels of government will be involved. Jim, I'll start with you. For Minister Jean to say what he said, what do you feel that signals about where the government is at with the Canada deadline quickly looming?
I think it's desperation, quite frankly. I think you don't say those sort of things in public when you're trying to negotiate a deal. You keep it, close to the vest, and you keep it under the wraps a little bit because you want other companies to think that they should be coming forward, and you would have these confidential discussions. And then at the end of the day, you have to release the information, and you get the best deal that you possibly can, and you award the contract to whoever deserves it. But at this point, it seemed a little bit of pie in the sky. And I think they're desperate because the chaos that's going on around them with other political considerations, they're trying to find some kind of diamond in the rough. And this is what they're running with at this stage.
Rob, how does this Alberta government messaging play when it comes just a day after the CEO of Cenovus, John McKenzie, declared the pipeline unfinanceable, blasting federal government policy in the process? Where does a comment like that leave the MOU?
Well, it raises a lot of questions about it. I think it plays into the hands of those who have raised questions about the validity of this or just how real it is. And I think of the context in Alberta, where the Premier has held up the MOU as an example of progress between Alberta and Ottawa, I think the danger and how it plays into the referendum is that it almost can provide ammunition to separatists who say, none of this is real, nothing has changed, nothing ever will change. And so I think, unfortunately, it starts to cloud that debate. I mean, we'll know soon enough. Obviously, we're getting very close to a deadline here for an actual proposal to be submitted, and we'll see what that looks like. I mean, the Premier in the past has used the term consortium, which would seem to imply there will be different partners, different private sector partners, probably some level of government investment. Maybe that involves the government's bitumen royalty and kind program as a kind of a trade-off to incentivize companies to be a part of this. And maybe that's the unfortunate reality, that you need some government backstop with that degree of regulatory uncertainty. But that's the real test here. And I know we'll get into the Premier's approval numbers, but I think, a lot hinges in a way on being able to really move the ball forward on this and show some meaningful progress.
Jim, before we get to those approval numbers, maybe to pick up on some of Rob's points there, what should be made of Brian Jean's comments appearing to open the door to government, public dollar investment in this pipeline project?
Well, I think they've heard the word from the industry, where the industry is not going to put $30 billion into a pipeline and do the Pathways project with carbon storage and retrieval. It's just that's $16 billion. And I think they're softening up the public, because at some point the government, whether it be the federal government, the provincial government, or a combination of the two, are going to come forward and pay for the sequestration of the carbon with that $16 to $20 billion price tag to it, in exchange for a $30 billion commitment for a pipeline. It's just, it's sort of written in stone at this point. Well, it's not written in stone, but it's something that seems perceptively down the road that that's the direction this will be taking.
All right. Next up, according to the latest poll out from the Angus Reid Institute, Danielle Smith's popularity is slumping. The Premier's approval rating drops to an all-time low of 39%, down 7 points from the previous poll in March. Danielle Smith has been trying to thread the needle on separation, saying she does not want Alberta to leave Canada, while also putting that very question in front of voters in the fall referendum. And Danielle Smith, not alone on the slumping popularity front. BC's David Eby down to 31%. Ontario's Doug Ford at the bottom of the pack. He's at 21%. Rob, how concerning should this be for Danielle Smith, with a whole summer of debate lying ahead over the contentious issue of a question of separation in that October referendum?
Well, I think the good news for Danielle Smith is that, we're a year and a half away from an election, and a lot is going to happen between now and then. Clearly, we'll see what happens with the MOU. There's, of course, the results of the referendums coming up in the fall. All of that is going to shape Alberta politics going into next year. So there's a lot of time to deal with all of this. I mean, I think it shows the challenge she has had in trying to keep everybody happy in this referendum debate, those who don't want us to go down this path, and separatists who are mad that she hasn't, further carried their water, put their question, or sort of taken up their cause or their mantles. So she's managed to kind of anger both sides. I think there are other issues, too, that remain priorities for Albertans, but the government hasn't really focused on issues around affordability or the economy. It's really been a narrow focus around these issues. So I think that's hurt her popularity. I think the other good news is that the UCP as a brand tends to pull better than maybe the Premier herself. And I think the NDP on the other side still face their own challenges. I think that still works in her favor. But I think it's a concern for them.
Jim, what impact do you see approval numbers like this having on talk out of separatist corners of challenging Danielle Smith's leadership of the UCP and even control of the party?
I'm always surprised at the resiliency of the Premier, that she's managed to keep the numbers as high as they are. She usually runs anywhere from 42 to 51, and is always in that middle support in the comparison to other premiers. But the movement separately by the separatists in her party, or which she has to fear at this point. They only need 22 constituencies to agree, and they can order a leadership review. And that would be horrendous. The nice thing for her is that there's no one in the off ramp waiting to take over her position. Can you imagine? So the next person who would win the leadership would become the Premier. Can we envision, a Mitch Sylvester being the next Premier, or Jeffrey Rath, or David Parker? I mean, these would all be very, very scary scenarios. And I think at some place in the heart of hearts of the UCP, they know that she is their leader, and she earned what 91% or something in the last review. So I think they'd be thinking twice about getting rid of her.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, Corb Lund's anti-coal petition crosses the finish line. What should the country music artist expect next? More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. We heard from country music artist Corb Lund off the top on delivering his Water Not Coal petition to Elections Alberta on Wednesday. Jim, anticipating that signatures will be verified and the petition labeled a success, what message do you see this sending to the Smith government?
Well, they should have already had this message, because every poll they've taken has suggested that everyone's against this, with the exception of the big coal companies. And as mentioned, there's very little royalty. There's only a 1% royalty for this the coal that they get out of there. So it's not popular. It actually, one of the things that have united both the rural and urban people in Alberta is this terrible coal policy. And they've, when Jason Kenney snuck it in on a long weekend, it was late on a Friday afternoon, a long weekend in May, immediately people objected to it and resented it. And this is, the government should have changed this way back, but they've sort of appeased the companies and talked about lawsuits, and they were afraid of lawsuits. Well, they've already paid $200 million in compensation to these companies. This is the time to actually stand up to these companies as the Albertans want.
Rob, given what played out with the Forever Canadian petition and how it was left in the background for a time, how do you think Albertans should expect the government to deal with Corb Lund's petition?
Well, look, I mean, the Premier has indicated she's willing to put this on the ballot if it succeeds. So I think certainly that should be there for the October ballot, assuming these signatures are verified. I think there was a challenge to with everything else on the ballot, all these other issues, to make sure that this is still getting the attention it needs, that it is being discussed, that Albertans are informed going into this. But credit to Corb Lund and all of the volunteers behind this. I think it's a real challenge just to get to that threshold. I think this was something that was maybe seen as almost kind of a niche issue, or something a little more specific to southwestern Alberta, but engaging Albertans right across the province. I think that was a big achievement. So, yeah, I think accomplishing this sends a real message. This isn't something the Alberta government can ignore or sweep under the rug. I don't think they wanted this to be on the ballot, but I don't think they have a choice now.
Jim, what do you make of Corb Lund's firm stance on the question that he took to Albertans with a petition being the same question that appears on ballots if it in fact does go to the referendum?
Of course, in that question was the ultimate objective is to get legislation that bans Grassy Mountain and Blackstone. And so I think the government is going to take the exit ramp on this and not put it on the referendum, but simply come up with legislation that says we're going to ban those. But it's going to be massaged to reduce the impact on anything that the companies, the coal companies, would have, and also on some of the communities who have said they want more employment because of it. So I think the government's going to take a bit of a back road route, because the ultimate aim and the question actually included the fact that all we want is legislation banning these developments, and they can do that without it going to the referendum. And I think that might be the approach that the government will take.
And what if that's the case, Rob? What does that say about this being an exercise in democracy?
Well, I think I would imagine Corb Lund and those on kind of his side of this would probably appreciate it, because, Jim's right. I think that's been the real focus and the concern about these specific projects, the impact on water supply, the impact on the Rocky Mountains. So that might be enough to be a victory, but I don't think it would close the door on all of this moving forward. So I think that was part of what the referendum was trying to do, was to, yes, deal with these projects, but prevent this from happening again. I think this legislation path would still leave that door open.
Jim, how much of a public dialogue debate do you see emerging over the question on coal mining ahead of the October referendum, if in fact the government follows through and that's where it lands, is on that ballot? Does it hit the same level of discourse as we're seeing now over the issue of separation?
No, I think the people who are in support of coal mining are such a minority that it's really not a discourse that could occur with any great success. You couldn't really have someone on the other side of the debate. It's just overwhelming. Albertans want clean water, and they're saying that water over coal is just so simplistic, and it hits it right on the head. And everyone is downstream from these coal mines, mainly in southwestern Alberta, but also in southeastern Alberta here in Medicine Hat. We are on the same systems, and we have to drink that water. And all our irrigation, and the cumulative effect on the property, the lands that are irrigated, builds and builds and builds. Selenium doesn't wash away; it stays in the ground.
Rob, last 30 seconds to you. If the question ends up on the referendum, how challenged will Corb Lund and his crew be to keep their issue on the front burner in front of Albertans?
Well, it won't be easy, but I think just the fact that they were able to get these signatures with all of this dominating the debate in Alberta, I think shows that people are still engaged on this to a sufficient degree. So I think they'll have to continue these efforts, even though it sort of feels like they're at the end now. It's just sort of the end of the beginning. But I think they've proven that that there's a way to keep this near the forefront.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks,
Michael.
Rob.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about country singer Corb Lund's anti-coal mining petition being submitted to Elections Alberta on Wednesday. Obi says, as an underground miner, I can't support this. Wendog adds, we need jobs. JJ responds to that with this: no point in jobs if the environment is destroyed. But Jonah writes, we need clean water. That provides and sustains a lot more jobs than a few mines and their destructive byproducts. And C. Haji weighs in with, put it on the referendum, Danny, and adds a B to referendum's spelling there. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, will new online safety legislation blocking social media access for kids under 16 bring sufficient safeguards? We'll get reaction from children's advocate Sarah Austin on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone. From all of us at Alberta Primetime, thank you for watching, and join us again next time.